All right, we are back. Yes, the regular season is technically over, Army, Navy notwithstanding. Championship week. So at Betting You, we've got all the games. We're going to break down literally every single game on the slate. We don't need a second episode. We don't need additional time. We got you covered right here. We're going to give you a thought on every championship game. I'm Rasa and Matt Gajewski joins me. We'll talk a little playoff as well. You guys know the drill. Welcome to the show. We hope you've been with us all year, but if you're just ducking in for the last hurrah here, we're still happy about that. Sir, you must be excited. Obviously, we get to finally see the dominoes fall into place, even though I'll be honest, I think there's a lot of opportunities for chaos in the playoff.
Yeah, it's pretty wide open, more so than previous years. There's a lot of different scenarios that can plan out with two really weak, undefeated teams that sort of control their own destiny. I'm sure we'll debate that. But to be honest with you, because of some of that noise, I'm just more excited to see who gets like New Year's Six bowls and who plays each other in bowl season and what's going on in the transfer portal over the playoff. I'm sure I'll get excited for it as we get closer. But yeah, we'll see what the committee decides to do. They largely just take whatever's convenient precedent-wise for them with injuries and stuff to put in teams that will draw the most money. So it's very difficult to talk about. But I guess we could talk about it. There's probably, 8 teams live to make the playoff right now?
So we got 2 in the SEC, 2 in the Big Ten, Texas, 2 in the Pac-12, and Florida State. 8 teams, yeah.
Yeah, I think Michigan's in no matter what. They've already punched their ticket with the Ohio State win.
SEC winner.
I don't know. What if Bama wins?
So that
they have an outright loss to Texas.
They're going to have to do something. They're not
That's where things get weird, and that's where, like, the committee just chooses teams. Like, does Georgia get in over Bama with an outright loss? Then it's like the slog jam. Texas has the outright win over Bama, who Bama in this situation has an outright win over Georgia. Like, who do you leave out? Somebody's going to be very, very pissed. But I agree with you. Honestly, the 4 best teams in the country, in my opinion, are Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. That should be your playoff if you're actually going based on the 4 best teams, which we know they're not. Washington and FSU control their own destiny, so they kind of ruin a lot of this either way. I think the most likely is some combination of Big Ten winner, SEC winner, Florida State, and then probably an Oregon, Texas, depending on who wins those conferences. And I would probably side with Texas having the much more difficult strength of schedule over Oregon.
It seems like there's going to be a legitimate team left out. I don't want to get too bogged down into it. I do want to ask you just one question. Do you think there is any scenario that Florida State wins and is left out?
That's been a huge debate. I mean, I have no idea what the committee is going to do.
I think that's
at
impossible.
Least a debate for it because that team stinks without Travis.
It's not good. I still think they control.
Same. I don't know how if like any other player on the team got hurt, we wouldn't be having this question. But because it's Jordan Travis, I don't know. It's a huge slap in the face to everyone that played football for Florida State this year if just losing your quarterback erases everything you've done. So I think they should be in. Am I excited to watch it? No, they're going to get rolled by Georgia or whoever Michigan, whoever they play. So I'm not excited to watch it, but I don't know how you leave them out if they win, assuming they win.
I agree. But we will see. It will work itself out, and there's always going to be an upset or two. Maybe Liberty will sneak in with the undefeated season. I'd say doubtful.
I'll say one last thing. Ohio State is 50-1 to win the national championship. I think they have a stronger resume than Oregon and Texas as one-loss teams. They're not playing for a conference title, so they'll probably be hurt a little bit by that. But I don't know. The path is we don't know what the committee is going to do. We've seen them put in 2 Big Ten teams this year. Ohio State should be in based on their body of work. I think that's at least worth just like a sprinkling at 50-1. I don't know. They're a top 4 team that's probably going to get left out, but 50-1's a lot.
So I tweeted after the Ohio State game, does Ohio State still have a path? And people were as if I have a Michigan tattoo on my face. Like,
first of all, Ben, unless you're trying to farm engagement, you just can't tweet these things.
Like,
the morons have so many opinions that aren't founded in anything but their fandom.
I honestly could care. I could care less about Ohio State, but I do think they have a path to the playoff. And if they get in the playoff, I think they can beat anybody.
They're a
No
top
doubt.
4 team. And I mean, to defend myself a little bit to you, Texas and Oregon backers, who has Oregon beat with a pulse this year? They lost to Washington, and the Pac-12 is the worst Power 5 conference. Outside of maybe the ACC, I actually think the ACC is probably a little underrated when Clemson's fully healthy and FSU is fully healthy. But in the current rendition of that conference, I think the Pac-12 is the worst. People are counting these ranked wins over Utah and USC, who are like barely top 40 teams, as these huge pieces to Oregon and Washington's resume. I mean, like Texas has a significantly more difficult resume. They played Bama. The conference isn't that strong as a whole, but that Bama win is huge. And then Ohio State beat Notre Dame, and they played Michigan right down to the wire. 2 pretty good games for Ohio State. I think that team is very clearly a top 4 team in the country, and they're not going to be treated like it. So I don't know. I agree with you, and to the morons on Twitter.
Oh my God.
People are outraged. Watch some games. You'll figure it out.
Watch some games. Let's watch some games. Let's talk some games. We're just going straight through. We start with whatever this is. New Mexico State and Liberty. Liberty is undefeated. They played just seriously the craziest schedule I've ever seen. Just no real teams on it. I watched them against UTEP, and we managed to get a very nice backdoor in that game. 10-point spread here, 54.5-point total. Kick us off. This is a Friday game. You think Liberty just completes the undefeated season, or can New Mexico State beat them?
I think this game is probably going to be closer than people think. These teams already played this year in a game that was pretty close. You had Liberty winning by a score of 33-17, but the box score tells a different story. They were dead even yards per play, 6.8 apiece on both sides. New Mexico State had a ton of success running the ball. Liberty had a lot of success throwing the ball. What it came down to was 3 New Mexico State turnovers, where Liberty only had 1. And the New Mexico State turnovers were extremely costly. They had an interception at their own 46. They fumbled at their own 32. And then they had another interception going into score in the Liberty red zone. Their last one, they also had a turnover on downs at the Liberty 30-yard line. So, I mean, just probably the most costly turnovers you can have. None of them at midfield, either like in their own red zone or in the red zone going into score against Liberty. I think that game should have been much closer. But, I mean, turnovers, they happen in these games. Liberty, I think, has been very fortunate to beat up on a pretty easy schedule this year. You mentioned just playing UTEP. That was with Cade McConnell and Kevin Hurley. Second most recent game against UMass. They did handle Old Dominion, which I think is a pretty good data point. But then they beat Louisiana Tech, a down Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee by 7 points. Jacksonville State in a game where Zion Webb got hurt. Sam Houston by 5 points. There's a pretty volatile team, and they were outgained in a number of those contests. Aside from being dead even in yards per play against New Mexico State, they lost the yards per play battle to Middle Tennessee State, who just fired their head coach, lost to Western Kentucky, who was a very bad team this year compared to expectations. I don't know. There's a lot of noise in this Liberty team, despite being undefeated. I still like them a lot, though. You look at Caden Salter. He's been awesome. 59% completion, 10 yards per attempt, 29 touchdowns, 5 picks. Really good big-time throw to turnover-worthy play ratio. He takes care of the ball reasonably well. And then we know what he does on the ground. He's averaging 6.4 yards per carry. Like, this guy might get 1,000 yards rushing this year. He's at 899. 100 yards is in his range of outcomes. O-line is decent for Liberty. Much better run blocking than pass blocking. They have not kept Salter upright, 24% pressure rate. But this team just needs to run the ball on New Mexico State. New Mexico State is 69th in run defense. Their defense is actually not great overall. They're 82nd. They've been victimized against the pass, too. They're 88th there. So I think there's a lot of ways for Liberty to score. You have Quentin Cooley. They use like 8 receivers. Salter's awesome. Can New Mexico keep pace? And again, I'm not really buying Liberty's strength of schedule. They're 21st in overall defense. But what quarterbacks have they faced? UTEP on their third string, Tyson Pumachan, Grant Wilson. Hank Bachmeier was at 9.2 yards per attempt. Austin Reed, 8.7. Nick Vadiato from Middle Tennessee, 9 yards per attempt. Like, anytime they faced a competent signal caller, they're giving up production. They've been able to outlast those teams, even being outgained in some spots. But Diego Pavia is a reasonable signal caller. 61% completion, 8.3 yards per attempt. He runs himself. He has 806 rushing yards. Big time play, turnover-worthy play ratio, solid for him. So, I mean, I don't respect either defense, really. I think this just comes down to if you think New Mexico State can keep pace, and using the previous data point where they were dead even in yards per play, as long as Pavia takes care of this ball, I think this probably comes within the 10 points. I played 10.5 myself.
Got Odd Chopper on the screen right now. 10.5's all over the place. Don't take this at DraftKings because that's the only one that's moved to 10. Everything else is 10.5. Anything on the total, to me, it felt about right. 54.5 range, I see. I'd lean over, but I didn't bet it.
Same. You've got pacing issues, but both defenses. Well, I'll say New Mexico State's defense is proven bad. Liberty has just played a really easy schedule. So they have vulnerabilities that may be able to be exploited. But yeah, pacing is an issue in this game. Liberty's 108th, New Mexico State 129th. Like a single drive stalls, you're probably dead to get an over. So I'm not going to take a total. Also, I don't know if you need to bet this right now. I don't see this really getting through any key numbers. You can probably wait if Liberty takes late money, which might happen. Liberty, I imagine, being the public side of this bet, maybe you get a better number.
Yeah. I mean, there are, again, people just look at the record. We get to a much more impactful game, the marquee Friday game. We just talked about these teams a little bit. We got the Pac-12 championship, Oregon and Washington. I'll be honest, I think it's getting a little out. And I like Oregon in life. I think it's kind of crazy that every single person in the world thinks it's a foregone conclusion that they're just going to avenge the loss. We saw this with Utah and USC a little bit. 9.5. My first question is, do you think 10 is ever going to exist? And what are we doing with this game?
Honestly, it might come.
That's pretty wild.
I was looking to hammer Oregon on Sunday night, and then the line immediately came out at 9.5, and it's not a number I can take. Now, I don't think I could possibly back Washington either. So
no.
I also don't have stuff like, I live in an illegal state, and I can't bet things like team totals this early in the week. So, I mean, I'll probably end up taking like a stale Oregon over team total wise or something like that, because the total itself is really high, and I don't trust Washington at this point. But yeah, I mean, the line is kind of egregious. At the same time, do you really want to back Washington after their recent play? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. I'll get into the football stuff in a second, but I want to ask you, like, could you play Washington, or are you at kind of like, this is an Oregon or pass, and the numbers kind of pass right now?
So, yeah, I mean, it's funny. I take like a shot at society for everyone saying it's a foregone conclusion that Oregon's going to avenge the loss. I also think that, for the record. I'm not super high. I thought Washington easily could have got knocked off in the Apple Cup. Like, it's just, I'm not laying double-digit points in this game. I'm just not. I'm not even going to lay 9.5. I thought, and maybe I was wrong, I was thinking like if I could get 6.5, I would definitely take it. That's not in this stratosphere, so I'm kind of stuck. Maybe a position live if I like how the game's going. Maybe a total. Let me bring up the total and see what we've got here. You got 66.5. Should be back and forth, but that's still a lofty number to clear.
I agree. Yeah, it's tough to bet. I mean, Oregon, they have not played a difficult schedule. You've got Texas Tech, a game they should have lost. They were outgained yards per play. Washington, they did lose. They were outgained yards per play, but they were also 0-4 on fourth downs and made some questionable decisions, missed a field goal, had a field goal they could have taken at the end of the half and decided to go for a touchdown, end up with no points. So that was kind of noisy. And since that game, have they played anybody competent? I'm not entirely sure. Like, Washington State was somewhat close, 14-point game. They killed Utah, who I don't respect at all. They played USC, which was reasonably close. 36-27 was the final score. Then, I mean, Arizona State, Oregon State was probably their best win in this span outside of the ones we talked about, 31-7. That was last week. Oregon State's not really a team that's built to play from behind. So even though they're a strong team, they're kind of like a weird, noisy opponent when you look at the schedule. Washington, despite taking care of business, this team has looked really suspect of late. Even more suspect than Oregon. You beat Arizona. That's kind of a feather in their cap. Then they beat Oregon in back-to-back weeks. Solid. From there, you go and you play single-digit game against Arizona State, single-digit game against Stanford. You beat USC by 10 in a game that was really noisy. You beat Utah by 7, who I don't respect. Oregon State by 2, Washington State by 3. They were outgained in a ton of these games. Outgained yards per play to Washington State. Outgained yards per play to Utah. Outgained yards per play to USC. This team, arguably could have 3 losses right now, which is insane. And their recent play has been horrible. Even Penix has struggled. Last 4 games for Penix, 57.5% completion, 7.8 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, 3 picks, 12 big time throws, 3 turnover worthy plays. That still sounds pretty good. I know. But I mean, to beat Oregon, to beat some of these good teams in the playoff, Penix needs the early season Penix. I mean, prior to this, he was at 66% completion, 9.1 yards per attempt, 32 scores, 8 interceptions. The early season Penix was winning them these games. And now the late season Penix, which it's not all his fault. They've had offensive line problems. He can't stay upright. You've had injuries to receivers like Jalen McMillan, who's back now playing in a questionable, like 50% of the time tag. I don't know. I think you need early season Penix to win this game against Oregon. And they also have a ton of defensive injuries. Like Asa Turner's missed the last couple games. Devon Banks is injured. Cameron Fabukalanan. Sorry, Cameron, I don't know how to say your name. He returned last week, but he only made it through 12 snaps. Those are all secondary injuries. Now you're facing also Vincent Nunley's been out at safety. That's 4 DBs. Not all of them were starters, but I mean, you lose a starter, then you lose a depth piece. Now you're on a third stringer. Facing Bo Nix, who has a full healthy cast of receivers. Gary Bryant left last week, but he's going to play at receiver. Troy Franklin, Tez, Trayshawn Holden, Bucky Irving's healthy right now. Offensive line is healthy. Everyone they're losing on defense is back. Julia Florence is expected to play. I was surprised Evan Williams at safety played last week. He played with a huge club on his hand, but he still played. So Oregon's the healthier team. They're playing better. Man, still a lot of points. This is not one I bet. One of 2 games that I really don't have much interest in betting right now. I guess to your point, maybe a live spot.
Yeah. You're talking me into Oregon, and I get it. We'll keep an eye on it. I don't think it's going to go to 10, so keep an eye.
Yeah, it's Oregon or pass, but I still like the numbers bad. So even though everything on the field points to Oregon, like, can you 9 points?
I hear you. Believe me, I hear you. I have not bet this. I'm not sure I will. I don't know. This is an interesting game. Big 12. Oklahoma State almost blew it to BYU. What a wild game that was. Had to come back in overtime in Stillwater, too. Now they're upwards of a 15-point underdog against Texas. Are they going to get rolled here, or are you actually looking to take the points?
I bet Texas on Sunday at minus 12.5, so I'm sitting with a good line. I don't think I would take this right now beyond 2 scores. Oklahoma State is a reasonable team. They're really hard to evaluate because of playing down to competition and then playing, I guess, up to competition as well when they face really good teams. Like this team barely beat Arizona State. They lost to South Alabama. They lost to Iowa State. And then they have just some of the premier wins in the country. Like they won all these tiebreakers because they beat Oklahoma. They beat Kansas State. They did lose to UCF in a game where luckily we were on UCF, the ultimate short spot of Oklahoma State. But it's just such a weird team to back, beating the elite teams in the conference and losing to really weak teams. I don't know what to make of Alan Bowman. He's been erratic at best. 60% completion right on the dot, 6.8 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 11 picks, 17 big-time throws, 20 turnover-worthy plays. A lot of those have come in recent weeks, and I actually think Bowman's run a little bad. If you isolate last 4 games, he's dead even interceptions to turnover-worthy plays, which is a ratio that generally will positively regress. Doesn't run at all. The O-line is pretty solid, and you always have Ollie Gordon to fall back on. So there are ways that I think Oklahoma State can score. But can they maintain drives against Texas? I don't see them stopping the Longhorns at all. The biggest concern with Oklahoma State is their defense. They're 89th, 111th against the run, 83rd in coverage. Ewers has been fine. He takes care of the ball. They don't ask him to do a ton. 69% completion, nearly 9 yards per attempt. He has the 17 scores, 5 picks, 12 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays. I don't really look at that too much with Ewers. I think it just speaks more to the offense, keeping the ball out of his hands more or less, just trying to get him the easy layup targets, which makes sense when you have Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, A.D. Mitchell, and Jatavian Sanders. So they do a good job of that. The O-line is awesome. They keep them upright, 14% pressure rate. They're top 5 in the country in pass blocking. run reasonably well. They've gotten pretty good production out of Jaden Blue and Cedric Baxter after Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL. I think they're also the healthier team. You don't really have a lot of guys injured. It's basically just Brooks with the ACL, and then Ryan Watts at corner. He got hurt in the first play last week. I'm not sure what his status is going to be. But OK State's still down a couple of their receivers. Stribling's out for the year. Sheetron's gone. They had Joe Mikowski go out with an arm injury last week. We'll see if he goes back. He's an offensive tackle. But yeah, man, I like Texas just blowing teams out of the water right now, just demolishing Texas Tech last week with Baron Morton. I don't know, man. It's tough for me to see Oklahoma State keeping this close. Don't like the current spread, but yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah. I don't like the current spread. I'm going to make a small case for the over, just because I think we've seen Texas. I mean, I think there's real chances Texas hangs a large majority of these points. You got 55.5, and it's less than -110. I think you can make a case for that. If Oklahoma State can get you 20 plus points, I think you get there. And I think they can do that even in a not great game by them. So if you don't want to lay north of 2 touchdowns, and there's a flat 14 if you shop, over 55.5, I'll make a little case for that.
Actually, I think that's the best number right now. That's a pretty good find. Pacing's pretty good in this game. Oklahoma State's 31st. Texas is 63rd. So you got a pretty willing dance partner on the other side. Yeah, I think this is a solid bet. That's my favorite one right now. I'm actually going to take it right now. Good find.
Yeah, come on in. Join the club. It's efficiency. It's not terrible tempo. I think Texas can certainly do their part. Oklahoma State will, tough defense right now that they're facing, but they'll be all right. They'll get some points on the board for us.
Can you find a 55?
I cannot find a 50. Let me just double check. I couldn't find a 55. I found 55.5 at -108. Let me see if there's a 55.
I just found one, but it's not legal.
So there's a 54.5 at BetMGM.
All right, take that. It's not going to be there. I don't even think 55 is going to be there, so that's a phenomenal number.
Yeah, 54.5 is out there. Man, this came down a little bit in the last couple, not minutes, but there you go. I like that over. I'm going to be taking that. I'm going to have to cost average down. Okay. Well, there we go. We're working through it here. Let's keep it moving. And I'll tell everyone, of course, we've got some deals going on. We got some fun stuff in the industry. Actually, let me just mention it because we're giving you bets on bets. You want to make sure that you're taking advantage of all the opportunities to shop these numbers. And if you don't play at Bet365, it's just another book to get access to. Now, I'll be honest. Not all of us have access to it. I don't. But if you happen to be in the following states, you do: New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, Iowa, Kentucky, Colorado, and welcome to the club, Louisiana. If you do, you're going to get under $50 in bonus bets by signing up. The link is below. You bet 5. Win or lose, you get $150. If you're in Louisiana, it's $1 into 365. That's just stupid, outrageous. But they want you, obviously, to see their platform, to test them out. They've been around forever. Good book. One I would recommend. If it was in New York, I would 100% play there. It's a great opportunity. You got to be 21 plus, 18 in Kentucky. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Take a couple minutes, get your $150 in bonus bets, and then use it to bet some of these games. Maybe you use it on Miami of Ohio and Toledo, the MAC. One of my favorite conferences, obviously. What do we got going on in the MAC here? It's a 7.5-point spread for Toledo. Is this theirs to lose?
I think so. This game is kind of weird with Brett Gabbert being injured. I think you might have Miami, Ohio down their top 3 offensive players with Gabbert already being out. Gage Larvadain is questionable for this game. Their coach had a quote about him saying, "We hope to have him in some capacity," which doesn't really sound too great. And then they've been out their number 1 tight end all season long. Toledo on the other side is definitely the healthier team. Just a couple guys on defense that are injured. Maxton Hook at safety, Terrence Taylor on the edge, but they're extremely deep there. So I don't even know if these injuries are the biggest deal, but we did see these teams play earlier this year. Tough game to evaluate because Brett Gabbert was playing. It's actually the game he got hurt in. You had Toledo with a 21-17 victory, but Miami, Ohio pretty soundly won the yards per play battle. They just had 2 turnovers. So I think Toledo probably should have taken an L in that game. But now you move it forward. What do we have with Avion Smith under center? Can this even play reasonably close to the previous score? A couple reasons I think it might. The game's really slow overall. Toledo's 70th in pace, but Miami is a bottom 3 team in pace in the country. They're 130th overall. And they've slowed even further since they had Avion Smith take over their quarterback duties. He's sort of like a glorified running back, 52.5% completion, 6.6 yards per attempt. He actually has 5 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays, which is fine. So he's not a complete stiff through the air, but he does most of his work on the ground, 3.4 yards per carry. I think this is going to be a slow, run-heavy offensive attack from Miami, Ohio. Toledo is pretty good at defending that. They're 17th against the run. They have a very good defense, best defense in the MAC. 17th against the run, 8th in coverage. So it's not going to be easy. But then when Toledo has the ball, I don't think it's going to be easy for them either. Daquan Finn has been better than Avion Smith, certainly, without a doubt. 65% completion, 8.3 yards per attempt. His touchdown to interception ratio is very good, 21-8, but 17 big-time throws, 14 turnover-worthy plays. He's mobile himself, but man, I think Miami, Ohio is the second best defense in the MAC. They're 18th overall, which narrowly trails Toledo at 12th. Great against the run in the pass, 12th there, 28th in coverage, good pass rush. I think even with Toledo being probably the best offense in the MAC, they've struggled at times, and we saw them struggle in this matchup previously this year. So I think this is probably a slow, run-heavy attack on both sides with inefficiency. I took the under at 46.5. I honestly don't hate the current number. And then I think the value of the points has me looking at Miami, Ohio. This is also coming down in their direction. I saw +8s, and now we're seeing +7.5 really across the board. If you want to bet them, I kind of think the time is now.
Yeah, I agree. That's also the side I would lean to. I would take the points. Low scoring game, the value of the points. And that quarterback, I feel like he's in there a lot. I've seen him play quite a bit. So it's not a true backup, in my opinion. Totally different. You mentioned the mobility. But he does have plenty of experience for a backup as opposed to some of these randos.
Yeah, I mean, Brett Gabbert's gotten killed now in 2 straight years. Avion Smith played a ton last year. Gabbert got hurt in non-con. So he had almost an entire year of Avion Smith last year. And I have his career numbers too. He's definitely not the best passer, but he has 787 career rushing yards. Like the offense just has to change under him, which is tough. You're almost like a poor man's Oregon State with DJ Uiagalelei. Miami, Ohio is not really the team you want playing from behind, especially if it's like 2 scores or something. They really struggle to throw their way back into games. But if this game remains competitive and slow, and I think it should, they've shown the ability to do this, just kind of slow games down, add some volatility and variance to it, and try to come away with wins. I think that's going to be their approach here. And I mean, last week, they were outgained by Ball State. They were outgained by Ohio in a game they won. So there's like tons of volatility, but I mean, that's the exact game plan they want to use. They're going to be at a disadvantage on offense in a lot of games now moving forward, and to slow it down, create a lot of variance has worked in their favor. So, I mean, this could be a game where they get blown out if they do have a turnover or something, but they could also keep this extremely close.
Agree. No doubt about it. Where are we going next? We're going to Boise State and UNLV. A game that I'm quite upset about. I didn't even know this game was supposed to happen. I literally thought San Jose State made the Mountain West after winning last week. Of course, that's not the case. That's quite annoying. I had some interest in that spot, but nevertheless, we get Boise and UNLV. I don't even want to talk about this now. I'm just sad, but it's a close competitive spread. Boise's had some issues this year. Talk to me about this game, what you kind of see as a 2.5-point favorite for Boise, 58.5-point total, give or take.
Yeah, they go to the computer tiebreaker.
You gotta be kidding me.
I mean, I personally don't hate it because I think San Jose State is the 3rd best team out of these 3. But I mean, like, it's kind of surprising, like, head-to-head wins don't matter in the tiebreaker situation, which that doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, as far as this game goes, I like UNLV getting points. I'd love a 3. Will take 2.5 if forced to. There were 3s early in the week. I just missed them. Boise's an interesting team, man. We've been talking about them a lot. I've shorted them to some success and also lost some money on them in recent weeks. They've gotten incredibly lucky playing backup quarterbacks. Their last 4 weeks have featured backup quarterbacks to some degree. They were facing Ben Britton and John Busha from Air Force. Somehow only won that game by 8 points. Both Cooper Legat and McKay Hillstead got hurt in their victory over Utah State. Dylan Hopkins didn't play in the game against New Mexico. That was the Devon Dampier game. And then Mikey Keene got injured in the Fresno State game. They still lost. So it's been an incredible run for them. Not to mention, prior to that, like they played an 18-16 game against UCF, which a lot of people will use as a key data point for Boise State. John Rice Plumlee got hurt in that game. So then, I mean, how good is this strength of schedule with all these backups? You lost to Colorado State. Yes, it was on like a Hail Mary at the end of the game, but yards per play was extremely close in that contest, 5.7 to 5.3. They lost to Memphis. That was a game that was extremely close in yards per play. This team has played a bunch of coin flip games this year, and even their most recent ones have been pretty close. The Fresno State game, they were soundly outgained. It was a game they clearly should have lost. Now you move forward. You've got Talon Green under center. He is erratic. 55% completion, 7.7 yards per attempt, 8 big-time throws, 11 turnover-worthy plays. He's third on the team in rushing, and he is very dynamic with his legs, 4.9 yards per carry. D-line is reasonable, 51st in pass blocking, a little better run blocking. And UNLV's defense, I kind of think they're built to stop a team like Boise. Actually, they're 80th overall, but when you dive in, 120th in coverage, 41st in run defense. Now, stopping Ashton Jeanty, Talon Green, and George Halani is a little easier said than done, but I at least like that the strength of this defense is up front. And not only is it like Talon Green under center, who's erratic and turns the ball over incessantly, but Eric McAllister transferred. Stephen Cobbs is out. Shea Whiting's out. Chase Penry's out. I mean, we're on like fifth string receivers in some of these instances. I don't know about the talent of these pass catchers. I'm honestly surprised they've been able to put up points in some of these games with these guys recently. But then Boise's also injured on defense. Dimitri Washington on the edge has been out. Marco Notoriani at linebacker has been out, and he doesn't project to get better. Max Steggy and Ahmed Hassanan, whatever his name is, excuse me, I don't know these guys' pronunciations, but those are two edge rushers that got hurt in their last game. This Boise defense is already atrocious, 108th overall, 97th in run defense, 104th in both coverage and pass rush. They don't do anything well. Now they're more injured than they were. UNLV definitely is strong on offense. They're 69th overall, which I think doesn't do them enough justice. It's largely their run game, which has hurt them. But Maeva can run 3.8 yards per carry. They're awesome pass blocking, which I think is solid, 33rd overall. And this team has like elite receivers. Like Ricky White is a Michigan State transfer. This guy's like a borderline 4-star who's actually playing for your team. There's legitimate talent here. And then as far as health goes, I think they're going to get Jere Williams back, that stud safety that broke his foot earlier this year. We've talked about him a couple times, but he warmed up last week, just didn't get in the game. He's right there to play. And that's going to help this unit in coverage, even though I don't really trust Boise State throwing the ball. He's probably the best defender on this team who's been out for the entire season, basically, to this point. Getting him back would be huge. It's just really tough for me to see this being Boise State favored by any points, despite their recent run, albeit against all backup quarterbacks.
I assume you're comfortable just taking plus money with whatever you can find on UNLV?
Yeah, I might do that if a 3 doesn't pop.
Okay. That's kind of where I would go as well. Not that you're going to get great, but you know what? Plus 115-esque can work for this spot. We go from a game, and some people will be interested in that, but everybody is interested in this game. The game. Alabama and Georgia. Talked about it. Certainly, you can put it in quadruple Sharpie. We know if Georgia wins, they're obviously in. That's a fact. If Alabama wins, I guess there's a scenario I still think they would move mountains to get them in as the SEC champ. It's a 6-point spread. It's a 54.5-point total. Talk to me. I have one lean in the game, and it's not on a side. It's going to be a great game, but do you think Alabama can handle a team like Georgia and vice versa?
All right, I need you to go first.
Okay.
There's some things I'm considering in this game, but I want to hear your take.
Really, my take is just Georgia's defense is always good, but it's not that good. And I actually think that both offensive have the advantage. I like the over. I think there will be big plays. It's not a tempo stylistic matchup, but I look at this. I think both offenses are live to flirt with 30. I trust Milroe. That game last week was outrageous on many, many facets. We even saw last week again. I'm not going to pick through a Georgia Tech game, but Georgia's defense at times can be exposed in little spurts. They give up some production. I think they will here. I actually think that Beck and the receivers will bring them back if they need to. So I think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. I don't really have a strong take on a side, though.
Yeah, the side is hard.
Really hard.
There's two keys, I think, to the side. One, and if you have a strong take on this, I think it could guide you in picking a side. But I have a little bit of trouble evaluating these points. The first one is Georgia's played most of the season pretty banged up. So for them to do what they've done, I know it's against the SEC East. They played like 2 even semi-hard games all year, probably Ole Miss and Missouri. Everyone else in that conference is just a cut below them. So, I mean, even though they've been hurt, they've still been able to get it done. But still, what does this team look like at full strength? They basically benched half their team last week out of precaution. Obviously, they're playing Bama this week, but they still got Georgia Tech by 8 points with like their entire second string almost. Ladd McConkey didn't play. Brock Bowers didn't play. Ra Thomas didn't play. Those are all pass catchers. Tate Ratledge at guard didn't play. You still don't have Jamon Dumas-Johnson at linebacker with the fractured arm. Julian Humphrey didn't play. He's not a regular starter for this team, but I mean, you've had a ton of guys out for Georgia, and it's not just that. They played a large stretch of the season without Amarius Mims. You can look to other defenders that have missed games here and there for this team. If they have everybody active, which this projects to be the case, assuming just precaution for Ladd, Bowers, Tate Ratledge, especially on offense, I think Jamon Dumas-Johnson's really the only key absence I would even consider. But CJ Allen's played very good in his stead. Like, these young linebackers have been awesome. With Bama, it's the strength of schedule. They've played down to competition, if you will, just kind of a lack of a better term, but the schedule is way harder. Texas, they have the common opponent in Ole Miss, but I mean, the SEC West is way more difficult. A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee was one of their crossovers. LSU, they just played Auburn. And what I'll say about some of these single-digit victories that you might be looking at, Auburn by 3 points, Arkansas by 3, A&M by 6. They soundly outgained those opponents. Those scores should have been more lopsided in favor of Bama. Against Auburn, 6.6 yards per play. Auburn was at 5.7. At Arkansas, 6.6 to 4.2. Soundly outgained A&M. Like, I think this Bama team has actually left meat on the bone. And honestly, it probably stems from Milroe. We've talked about this a lot. Milroe has awesome efficiency numbers. I think you would take him over almost every signal caller in the country outside of maybe like 10 guys. You know their names. They're all going to get drafted. Williams, May, probably Beck. I mean, there's a lot of them. Anyway, 66% completion, 10.7 yards per attempt. He averages a first down every single time he throws the ball. 21 scores, 6 interceptions, 24 big-time throws, 9 turnover-worthy plays, takes care of the ball really well. Awesome rusher, 439 yards there. The O-line has gotten significantly better, and their pressure rate continues to drop. They've climbed all the way to the top 50 in pass blocking. Early in the year, you would have told somebody that they would be shocked and wouldn't believe you. They're also amazing in run blocking. It's just like, I think the public watches these Milroe plays. He has 1 a game, 2 a game that are just horrifyingly bad. Last week, it was him just going way past the line of scrimmage, throwing the ball downfield, taking penalties. Just really poor awareness. And he has a couple interceptions that are just mind-boggling too. But if you can at least weight the good plays and the bad plays equally, I think you have an awesome signal caller in Milroe, who's moved the ball against defenses that I think are at least on par with Georgia. To your point, this isn't the Georgia defense of last year. They're 15th overall, 30th against the run, 55th pass rush. Very good in coverage. They're 7th there. And they have some awesome defenders. Like Lassiter's had an amazing season. But Alabama has multiple ways to beat you. Milroe's legs. I honestly don't care that Jason McClellan got hurt, and I don't think he's very good either, and I'd rather see Roydell Williams. But both teams are pretty healthy now. Deontay Lawson came back for Bama. Jalen Key came back for Bama. Both of them should be in this game. I don't know. I want to play a Bama side, but Milroe, he scares me with some of the negative plays he makes. I mean, for every good play he has, there's like he does something every single game that has like Arkansas within 3 or Auburn within 3. So, I mean, I think they should cover the spread, but I don't know if I can actually take it.
I'm definitely not going to take it early in the week. So there's a little disagreement in the market. There are 5.5s out there, and then there's some 6.5s out there. If it ever gets to 7, and I'd say that's unlikely, I will bet Bama at 7. I'm going to bet the over. I do think it's going to be a higher scoring game. I think both offenses again, have paths to success. I don't know. I really think it's kind of impossible to tell how good Georgia is in some regards. They might just be amazing again. Obviously, they're very, very good, but like if you flipped their schedules, I don't know that either team would have a different outcome. Maybe people would say, well, Georgia would be undefeated again, no matter what. I don't know if that's true. And I think Alabama would be undefeated with Georgia's schedule. So it is very difficult to say. Great game. Keep an eye on it. We still got plenty of time before the game. All right, what do we got left? We got 4 games left. We're doing just fine here. We've got SMU and Tulane. It's not Georgia and Alabama. This should be a pretty fun game. This is right in your wheelhouse. SMU is just that team scores like banshees. I was a little surprised to only see a 48-point total here, but I do respect Tulane. 5.5-point spread. Do you have a lean in this game?
Yeah, the total's come way down, and it's moved way in Tulane's favor because Preston Stone broke his leg against Navy, left them in really long in that game, and it ended up costing them. So now you're moving to a freshman signal caller who we don't know anything about, and Kevin Jennings. The very, very small sample we have on him has been reasonable. 75% completion, 9.3 yards per attempt, 3 scores, only 1 big-time throw, but no turnover-worthy plays. I think that's probably what SMU is going to try to do, is just get the ball out of his hands quickly, those layup targets to their receivers. But O-line is pretty good for SMU, 18th in pass blocking, 9th in run blocking. Defense looks amazing. This team has played nobody all season long. You had the non-con against Oklahoma and TCU, both of which they lost pretty clearly. But since then, they had a wicked stretch of backup quarterbacks. Like starting in week 6, they played Charlotte. Jalen Jones got hurt. They played the quarterback platoon of ECU. They played Temple with no E.J. Warner. They played Tulsa with Braylon Braxton, Cardell Williams. They played Rice in a game where JT Daniels got hurt. And then since then, North Texas, Memphis, and Navy. Navy's Navy. They're the worst team in this conference. Probably. I already bet Army against them next week. Anyway, that's a little look ahead. But Memphis, 38-34. SMU barely outgained them. Very, very close game. So I don't know what you can really take away from this defense. Like, the quarterbacks you've played are just so bad. Gabriel and Chandler Morris had success against them in non-con, but Hennigan had 400 yards. Like, Chandler Rogers was reasonable, 7.7 yards per attempt. Attaway in that game for North Texas, 8.2 yards per carry. So it's like they've given up production at times, but how much do you really buy this SMU team as a whole playing this schedule? I know I didn't buy them at all even previously before the Preston Stone injury. So I bet Tulane on Sunday -2.5 and just kind of lucked my way into awesome closing line value. But yeah, I mean, Tulane's played a way more difficult schedule. They played Ole Miss. They played the tougher teams within this conference. Some of the games have been close, but we just saw them roll UTSA last week. I mean, Michael Pratt, receivers getting healthier. You're getting back Jaquan Jackson. They only really have 1 injury on defense. It's Corey Platt. He's been out since week 1. So, I mean, you've got a fully healthy defense. All the O-linemen that were hurt for Tulane returned to the game. Their last contest, that is. So, I mean, I think you just fall back on Pratt here. 66.5% completion, 8.8 yards per attempt. Double the amount of big-time throws compared to turnover-worthy plays, runs himself. The O-line is a 26% pressure rate, but again, they've had injuries this year. They're now fully healthy. I think they have a little bit of juice that might not be in these numbers. And then their defense is solid. 31st in the country, 29th against the run. That's probably what SMU has to do now that they're on a backup signal caller. It's Tulane or pass. Best line's kind of past you, so I could see passing. Maybe an under. I don't know. We put this in our chalkboard early in the week, so if you miss the number, it's probably a pass.
Yeah, I don't know what to make. Like you said, we don't know anything about this guy. Not that it matters. Do you think SMU would have been favorite? I mean, that was the part I was most almost intrigued with.
So it opened around 2.5, but I mean, we knew Preston Stone was hurt. We just didn't know how bad. It looked pretty bad. So
yeah, I didn't.
That's why I thought he was going to miss the game, and Tulane was the best side right away. So I think it'd probably be close to a pick 'em if he was in there.
It's unfortunate, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. Maybe this guy's
don't leave your QBs in there against Navy when
don't
you're
even get me started.
0.
I'll never understand that. I know weird stuff can happen, but some of these teams, all teams, not just them, but really, really just incredibly disturbing stuff. But we'll see. I'm going to keep an eye on that game. It might be another live position. I'll talk about our Discord in a second. We can always talk about that. We got App State. We got Troy. This is my favorite under the radar game of the non-important games. I like these teams. I've been a Troy backer all year. They're just a cool team. Inside 7. We know JMU is not here. What do you think about this matchup? It's 6.5 everywhere right now. Do you think that line's efficient or there's still value?
I think it's a fish, and I think this is the hardest game to bet out of all the conference championships, which is saying a lot because the Bama-Georgia game is pretty hard. I tend to side with you on the total. And then I think Washington-Oregon is pretty hard to bet. But this one, man, I find this very, very challenging. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Troy is an awesome team. I think you can go back to their only 2 losses. They played reasonably well against Kansas State. That's a game you're expected to lose. But I think they should have beat JMU, 4.9 yards per play. JMU was at 4.5. Gunnar Watson's been awesome for this team. 8.1 yards per attempt, 26 scores, only 5 picks. Big time throws to turnover-worthy plays, checks out. And his recent performance has been even better than that. He's almost, last 4 games, he only has 2 turnover-worthy plays. So he's almost entirely cut out those negative plays. And then the defense for Troy is awesome. 12th overall, 3rd against the run, 25th in coverage. One of the biggest things I think for teams this time of year is just remaining healthy. And I mean, you get hurt at the wrong times, you end up with like Florida State problems. But if you get hurt early in the year, you're dead to make games like this. This Troy team doesn't have any absences to key players. Every one of their starters is projected to play in this game. I mean, this is just a wild. It's almost as lucky as it, like the opposite of teams that have injury problems. Like that's unlucky, but to be completely healthy this time of year is just absolutely insane. App State, need to give them some credit. They have been playing really well of late, beating JMU, a game they rightfully won, outgained them 5 yards per play to 4.4, just beat up on Georgia Southern, outgained them by over 2 yards per play, crushed Southern Miss. You have to go back a ways to find some weird stuff in their box scores. They lost to ODU. They were the rightful loser in that game, getting outgained. And then they had a loss to Wyoming. That's a game I think they should have won. They outgained them by over a yard per play. But since we've seen Joey Aguilar kind of develop and get more snaps, he's turned into an awesome signal caller. And most recently, last 4 contests, 65% completion, 9 yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns, 4 picks. The biggest concern is the turnover-worthy plays, 13 big-time throws, 10 turnover-worthy plays. We've now seen what can happen when he erases those or some of them aren't converted to interceptions. This team is good enough to play with teams like James Madison. They beat Georgia State, who I think is a pretty reasonable team. I like Georgia Southern, too. Even Marshall, they killed them 31-9. We've seen Marshall hang with some pretty decent teams this year. App State is also fairly healthy. The only real injury I see that might be of consequence is Sean Collins on the edge. But I'm still concerned with this team. Even though they've played better, I still think they're a shootout team. Defense scares me. They're really bad against the run. 111th. And we have a top 30 rushing attack from Troy on the other side. Kamani Vidal is awesome. Troy's going to score through that mismatch. Can App State hang with Troy on the other side? I think is the biggest question to this. I respect Troy's defense. I think they played the easier strength of schedule. But yeah, this one I think is exceedingly tough to bet. I think the line should be around a touchdown in favor of Troy. 6.5, I'm not sure is enough value to bet the Trojans, and I definitely don't want to take App State at that number. So I think it's going to be a pass. And then the total, 52.5 is a pretty good number. Neither team is particularly fast. Troy is 85th, so they'll slow it. App's a little faster at 45th, but both offenses have shown efficiency. So I don't know. It's kind of pulling you in both directions there too. I don't know if I'll play this game.
Tough game. I think I like Troy a little more than you. You hit on it. I think there's a real chance that Troy guts them on the ground. I know they don't have the most efficient rushing attack at times, but you mentioned that back. He's a player, and Troy's defense, I think they will get pressure. I think they will cause problems. It could be a pretty ugly game, and I don't think 6.5 is screaming value, but I do think this is playable at 6.5. You're gonna find it everywhere. I think it's gonna pop to 7 by kickoff. So I'm gonna put Troy on the list for me. I need some bets for this championship week, and putting Troy on the board. All right, we got 2 games left, but I do want to mention, obviously, we've had big things going on here at Odd Shopper. You always see the odds screen on this very show, but I want to just show you guys what we got going on because we revamped the entire offering for Odd Shopper. The link is below. And what you're getting, first of all, we've changed everything. You see here, you can get it for the week, you can get it for the month. You come on in, you're getting all these things. You're getting positive EV bets. You're getting our picks, which we're formulating in Discord. You're getting an optimizer, projections, parlay builder, conversion tools. It's all here along the top just to show you kind of what, of course, EV bets, it updates in real time, fully customizable from leagues. I only want to bet basketball to a sports book. I only play on these couple books, no problem. To categories, I only want this type of thing. You see what we're doing here. You have a bankroll tracker. It'll update the optimal percentage to bet. Make sure you're allocating unit size correctly. All this type of stuff. Powerful tools. Come on in for the week. See these things in action. And when you do, of course, you get our Discord, which is growing quickly. We're revamping it on the fly. Couldn't be more excited about these changes. Again, it is a great time to get involved. The link is below. We'll see you in there. When you're in there, make sure you hit us up. We'll introduce you to the entire team. This game shouldn't even be on the list because we just shouldn't have to talk about it. It's cruel, it's unusual, and it's certainly punishment. What are we doing here? It's up to 23 in some spots. I would assume, and maybe I'm wrong, did you seriously find a bet in this game?
Well, I can't. The one I'm probably going to take is just Michigan over their team total.
Okay.
But that's not available to me living in this backwards state of Wisconsin. But I mean, Iowa's probably going to get shut out here. The other one I'm interested in is Iowa's team total under, which I don't know what they are because I don't have them available to me.
I got you right here. So
yeah, I've inferred guesses based on the spread. Iowa's probably a 7 or 6.5.
Yeah, it's looking that way. So you can bet Iowa touchdowns over under a half, and it's juiced to the under.
Okay, that's not a bet.
You can bet Michigan over 29.5.
Yeah, that's their implied team total.
Yeah. They don't have a 6.5 out there. They have Iowa over 7.5, but it's minus 220 to the under, which is just, what are we doing here?
Yeah, so knowing the juice now, I would rather just play over the 29.5 with Michigan. Like, Iowa hasn't faced a competent offense maybe this entire year. You just played Nebraska. They beat them by 3 points. Played Illinois with John Paddock, beat them by 2 points. Rutgers, they shut them out. Credit to them. I actually like Rutgers. Northwestern was a 10-7 game. Minnesota was 12-10. Wisconsin was 15-6. Purdue was 20-14. Michigan State was 26-16. Penn State, they got shut out. Western Michigan's a MAC team. Iowa State was 20-13. And Utah State was 24-14. They were outgained by Utah State. Outgained. I mean, okay, for one thing, I was not scoring in this game. They might get shut out unless they get like some crazy field position stuff with a turnover or, I don't know, there's some Torrey Taylor magic punting. I was not scoring. Michigan, I think, is by far the best offense this team has faced. I don't know if this team has faced one offense in the top 75 all year. So, yeah, I respect their defense. They're 5th overall. First in run defense, first and coverage. But yeah, it's really easy to say that when you play Chuba Purdy, John Paddock, Gavin Wimsatt, Brennan Sullivan, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, Tanner Mordecai, Hudson Card, Caden Hauser, Drew Aller. They played Western Michigan before they even played Hayden Wolf, like Rocco Becht. I mean, name one good quarterback they faced. So sure, I mean, you can look at Iowa defensive metrics. This team looks awesome on paper. You also don't have your best defensive player in Cooper DeJean. He's out for the year. I mean, Michigan might hang like 45 on this team. The only even comparable data point, I think, is Penn State, who hung 31 on you. And Penn State's offense is crap. Michigan's way better than this. So, I mean, as long as Michigan cares enough, they could hang like 50 points on Iowa, I think. I do not respect this defense because of the opponents you face. Like, I don't think we should be putting any stock in the Big Ten West teams that Iowa's been able to barely skirt past.
I got a couple bets for you here that you might be interested in. We've got total touchdowns in the game, 3.5.
Can you get that Michigan? Okay, so I'm in an illegal state. I can't see a lot of these.
Yeah. Michigan over 3.5 touchdowns is plus 135.
I'm sure that's better than a better number than total touchdowns in the game entirely.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, they got Iowa with a chance to score over 3.5 touchdowns for the game is -125.
Yeah, I'd rather just play the Michigan side of all of these by themselves because I don't think Iowa scores, and Michigan legitimately might hang like 45.
First half, Michigan -13.5.
If I'm betting a side, it's Michigan. I don't really. I mean, the first half stuff versus the total game is very efficient. So if you don't love full game, I don't know, man.
Let me see what else I can find. This is like, I'm actually enjoying myself here. This is hilarious and just sad.
I plan to take an over Michigan team total. I just can't do it right now. Can you find a punt prop?
This is, I can't even believe this is accurate, but I'm looking at it. Iowa team total points in the first half. Over or under 0.5?
Dude, their implied team total 6.5.
What are we doing here? See, this is where if your implied total for a half is 0.5, you should be jettisoned from the game. That should be a rule.
This is why you don't have divisions within your conference.
What are we doing here?
Wasting time.
This is disturbing. We really, really are. Yeah, I can't even. Okay. Before, I've had enough here. No Moss. We're going to the last game. You see what we did? Big Ten. You got your 5 minutes. 5 minutes too long. Louisville and Florida State. This is worth talking about. It's down to 2.5. Ding, ding, ding. I thought I was sneaky because it moved to 3.5. I'm betting it again. I'm betting Florida State. Go ahead, take it away. I don't care. I don't like Louisville whatsoever. They're lucky Kentucky isn't in the ACC. It shouldn't even be here. But talk to me about this game as we close it out.
Yeah, I did the same thing as you. I bet this at 2.5 in favor of Florida State. It's mainly a short on Louisville, who I don't respect. They played the easiest schedule in the ACC this year, which this was semi-predictable. As long as they could just like handle their business, they were probably going to get to this game with the schedule they played. But man, Louisville has looked really suspect of late. You have the loss to Kentucky, the rightful loss. I know Kentucky had like a kickoff return touchdown and stuff, but Louisville still was at 5.3 yards per play. Kentucky was at 6.1. The game prior, I mean, my goodness, Miami, can you please finish a game? 7.5 yards per play for Miami, 6.6 for Louisville. They should have lost that game to the Hurricanes. You did lose to Pitt, and yards per play was dead even in that game, so there wasn't crazy. Louisville did turn it over 3 times, but you still were like dead even with Pitt yards per play. That is a coin flip game at best. You end up losing it. Otherwise, like, who has this team played? Virginia Tech, Duke with no Riley Leonard. They beat Notre Dame, which is the biggest feather in the cap. It like kind of counteracts that Pitt loss. But then NC State, Boston College, Indiana, Murray State, Georgia Tech, a game that came down to 5 points, which was dead even in yards per play. There's a world where this Louisville team has like 4 losses heading into this game, and we're not even considering them as a live underdog. They do have injuries. Jarvis Brownlee, he was only able to get through 17 snaps in his return from injury at corner. Stephen Herron missed their game at edge. He's a big loss. Josh Minkins, a depth safety. He missed the game. Cameron Kelly got hurt in the game. We'll see about this, but their DBs have been banged up recently, and they've been giving up a lot of production through the air. And that was highlighted by Devin Leary, who I don't really respect, throwing for 9.4 yards per attempt last week. The week prior, Tyler Van Dyke, 8.4 yards per attempt. Anthony Colandrea, 10.1 yards per attempt for Virginia, the backup freshman signal caller, throwing for a first down every time he drops back to pass. Now you have Tate Rodemaker. I don't know what to make of him. I don't think anyone truly does at this point. He clearly looks young. I mean, they took like 4 delay game penalties, but I mean, he's still throwing to Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. You have a fantastic run game to fall back on, and Trey Benson, Toafili, top 20 offensive line in both pass blocking and run blocking. I think Rodemaker should have some success against this defense over the top that's really banged up in the secondary. But Louisville's also middling against the run. They're 39th. And we already mentioned the slate of opponents they've faced. Who's to say Florida State just can't run the ball over them and only use Tate Rodemaker as a game manager? They're fully healthy on the O-line now. You get back Bless Harris. I mean, Darius Washington and Byers were ready to go, allegedly. They just didn't need them in the game. You don't really have any defensive injuries, which is another strength for Florida State. Like, this team is awesome in both run defense and coverage. Jared Verse is playing out of control. all their transfers have stepped up. Like Fentrell Cypress has been awesome in the secondary. Plummer has not been great of late, especially 65% completion, 8.7 yards per attempt on the year. But those numbers have gotten worse. He's more exactly the same amount of big time throws as turnover-worthy plays last 4 games. O-line is a 25% pressure rate. So I do think Florida State's pass rush can get home on this unit. I don't know, man. I think this line has gone too far because of the Rodemaker stuff. And it sounds like you agree.
I really do. I obviously, there's only 2 scenarios here. I either have a massive blind spot with Louisville or this line is wrong. Because to me, going into Gainesville to take on Florida was a much worse situation than this for Florida State. And they were 6.5 point favorite there. So I don't really understand this. I really don't. I think that Florida State, yes, Jordan Travis is amazing, but the rest of the team isn't horrifically injured. Like, they're fine. They're all there. You couldn't ask for a better situation for, Rodemaker. And the defense is just disgusting. I think that they're really going to handle Louisville. I don't get this line. I don't. At 2.5, it's my favorite bet on the board. I'll keep it very, very simple.
I was waiting for this game all season long, anticipating Louisville getting here with this easy schedule. And as you call it, I thought we were going to have like a generational wealth spot on our hands. And then Travis goes down. And I still like it, but now it just adds like this one element of uncertainty. Whereas I wanted to hammer FSU, even in like week 4 and 5, as this game was looking more and more likely. Now with Rodemaker, what I will say is you're kind of compensated for it by the line movement, having him in. So, I mean, if you just trust the Florida State defense, Benson, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, you trust these guys, I still think it's a good bet as well.
I don't think it's also a given that this guy can't do it.
He's a 4-year player. I mean,
he's been around. I don't know.
Yeah. The only thing he just flat out can't do that Jordan Travis can is run.
Yeah.
But as a passer, I mean, so far this year in the tiny sample, only a 57% completion, but 9.1 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 4 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. He's been taking care of the ball. I mean, as long as you cut out, and this is on coaching a little bit, cut out some of the delay of game stuff, like give him a chance to not play behind the sticks and stuff. That should really help him too. I mean, I don't know. Like, do you think, like, the parallels to this kind of remind me of like Kyle McCord, like you're throwing to Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, Kate Stover, like Rodemaker's throwing to Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell. Like, what does he actually really have to do as long as the scheme is reasonable and you can get the ball in the hands of these elite skilled players? I mean, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of situations like that.
Reminds me of the Niners a little. I'm not saying he's Brock Purdy, but like, you got 5 great weapons and a nasty defense. Don't screw it up. Like it. I mean, you could say this about most quarterbacks, but I'm telling you right now, if this guy doesn't have multiple turnovers in this game, Florida State's covering. They're covering. Like, I don't see how they don't cover unless they literally gift Louisville a couple of possessions.
I already bet it too, man.
Let's go. Okay. Brief recap, and then we'll bounce in out of here. Again, as always, you're going to be seeing us. Bowl season will be around the corner. We had such a great year at Betting You. The support's been appreciated. If you want to support us more, like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski, at JazzRazDFS, and make sure you join Odd Chopper. Be part of that. You saw me actually add the Florida State bet to my card in real time on this show. It's super simple now. Really, really cool that they built that out for us, and we're just getting started. But I always ask you, favorite bets before we get on out of here. Do you have a couple for the people? Just first glance. I know you'll have a VOD later in the week.
Yeah, it's a little tougher just with the short slate.
Yeah.
Kind of treat it like week 0 where the bets have thinner margins. So just know that coming in. Normally when we're dealing with 75 games, we can really isolate some. I know this is going to be your favorite, but it's my favorite too. It's FSU.
Yes.
I'll let you break it down. Other than that, I like Texas in the game. The line has kind of moved away from us, so I do like that over as well at 55. I played that live on the show. Tulane, I still think is live at 5-ish, 5.5 if you can find it over SMU. And then otherwise, my favorite one's going to be Miami, Ohio, Toledo under. I took 46.5. Hopefully you can find something in the 44-45 range.
Yeah, I don't even mind the points with Miami of Ohio either, north of 7. But Florida State for me. They're going to determine my week. think the worst bet on the board, toughest bet on the board, not the worst, is the Pac-12 game. That is a really difficult game. I know you said that the Troy App State game is a tough game to bet, but we'll work through it. We'll see what we get. The lines are going to move. That's what makes it great. We still have plenty of time between now and Saturday, but we've done it 10 up, 10 down. Hell of a run. Let's see what we get for conference championship week. For me, for Matt, and for everyone here at Odd Shopper. Good luck, friends. Enjoy these games. Share, support, rate, and review. Stop by for bowl season. We're going to be here, and I hope you guys are as well. Good luck. Enjoy. Cash those tickets. We'll talk to you soon.